The whisper I pulled out of the noise. I make other people sound certain. That's what an audio post-engineer does when you stop romanticizing it. Erase the doubts a room tried to print on a voice. My days are spectrograms and coffee, de-essers that caress instead of shave, little surgical EQ moves that feel like good manners. People send me their chaos, panels in equi-hotels, documentaries mic'd by optimists, podcasts recorded next to aquariums, and I give them authority. Mara says that's why she liked me first. You listen like a job, she teased once, looping her scarf around my neck while we waited for a car that swore it was a minute away. She runs partnerships for a culture foundation, which means rooms that behave for cameras and donors who prefer their ethics plated. We met when I fixed a live stream she'd produced that sounded like it had been recorded in a train station. I sent it back breathing. She sent a thank you that read like a dare. We sparred our way through the first month, and then stopped pretending sparring wasn't foreplay. The job that cracked us open pretended to be simple. A streaming service needed a 70-minute panel cleaned for a quick drop. 4 executives, 1 moderator, an audience that thought unwrapping mints was a constitutional right. They recorded it in a ballroom by the river, the kind with chandeliers like an apology. The moderator's mic was fine. The panel mics were not. I could see it before I heard it, those barcode blocks of noise floor on the spectrogram where a sound system's anxiety lives. I set the project up the way I set everything up. New session, color code, name the tracks like I believe in order. Under the main tracks, I created a safety lane for what we call the bus. That messy mix the house engineer sends to cameras. That's where the gremlins hide. If you're lucky, that lane also carries room tone you can harvest. If you're unlucky, it carries room tone that learned to talk. Mara was at the kitchen island building a deck for a donor breakfast. She wore the hoodie she steals from me and the face she saves for problems that think they're bigger than they are. This breakfast wants a thesis, she said. Give them an anecdote with a scarf, I said. People don't remember arguments, they remember objects. You sound sure, she said. I make a living faking it, I said, and when she smiled, the room committed to being ours for another night. At 2 in the morning, after she'd gone to bed smelling like tired jasmine and toothpaste, I pulled the first pass. Good enough for a producer. Not good enough for me. The moderator's laugh had a metallic tail that felt like regret. I cut it, shaped the low end so the room stopped asking for credit, and then soloed the bus to see what I'd missed. Here's the thing about noise reduction. If you've spent enough hours staring at frequency bands, you can see a whisper before you hear it. It looks like a soft river at 1.2 kHz with a shiver of sibilance above 4, footsteps of vowels barely heavier than air. In the first 10 minutes between applause and a mic cough, I saw a thread like that and leaned in. A chair creaked. A breath brushed fabric. Then a voice, close to the mic but off axis, said, low, amused, "After this, the terrace." And a second voice answered with a laugh I know from the inside of my mouth. The human body is ridiculous. I felt it everywhere at once, jaw, stomach, knuckles, like my nerves had mistaken a whisper for an electrical storm. It didn't sound like Mara performing for a room. It sounded like Mara amused at a secret, a tone she uses when she trusts a person to carry the joke without dropping it. The whole clip was 3 seconds. The panel rolled on. The house mix swallowed them. The terrace waited in the sentence like a street. You recognize even if you haven't walked it in months. I hit stop. I sat there in my dim studio watching the waveform sit there like evidence pretending to be a mountain range. I told myself other explanations. A voice is a voice. Familiarity is a parlor trick. Everyone who works rooms learns to laugh like consent. Then, like an idiot and a professional, I rewound and soloed those 3 seconds a dozen times, carving out the HVAC hum, pinning the breath with the kind of multiband compression that makes speech pull focus. Terrace, the first voice repeated, delighted in its own planning. Terrace, Mara's laugh agreed, the way she agrees when she intends to say no later and wants to be kind about it now. I closed the session and opened the window because I am not a person who calls people into a fight at 2:14 a.m. if I can help it. The river smelled metallic and patient. I thought about how often I sit in other people's silences and make them sound like knowledge. I thought about how much I hated being good at my job. In the morning, she moved past me in that casual nakedness people earn together. "You're up early," she said. "Work," I said, footsteps masquerading as sentences. "Panel good?" she asked, pouring coffee. "It will be," I said. She kissed me on the head and said she had a walkthrough at noon at the hotel with the chandeliers. "I'll be late," she added. "The board chair wants to rehearse being generous." "Take a jacket," I said, because that's who I am. The man who says whether when he means come home. When she left, I opened the session and did the adult thing. I checked the call sheet. The panel had been part of an innovation summit hosted by one of the hotel groups she courts. The sponsor list included North and Weaver, the brand that loves a marble plaque more than breath. The moderator was a journalist Mara tolerates because he pays for drinks. The panelists were people who would wear sneakers with suits to communicate humility. It told me nothing useful. Sound tells you when a room is lying in ways programs never will. At 3, Mara sent a photo of a stage with chairs that wanted to be opinions. I sent back a heart and a note about dinner. She wrote, "Donors kidnapping me," and an emoji with hands in the air. At 5, she texted, "Cocktail thing spilled over," which is the kind of sentence you can forgive 100 times until you can't. At 8, she wrote, "Terrace for 10 then home," and the word bloomed on my screen like a memory that had finally learned to spell itself. We pretend texting is a conversation. It is. It's a stack of telegrams, and I was tired of being literate. I put on a jacket and went for an errand that didn't have a name. The hotel lobby wore its civilized costume, quiet like money, staff who had trained their eyebrows out of having opinions. The terrace glowed. If you've ever looked at a place and thought, of course, you know the mix of hate and accuracy that followed. I didn't go out. I stood near a column, half blocked by a potted plant that didn't owe anyone much and looked anyway. 24 people did the curated mingle. Against the far rail, a man I recognized by posture if not by name leaned toward a woman whose laugh I have mapped. I didn't need to hear it with my ears to believe my monitors. Something in the rhythm is unforgeable. He said something. She tilted her head. His hand hovered at her elbow in that pretending not to touch that people employ to test gravity. My fantasies are not cinematic. I didn't march. I didn't perform. The city has raised me to be private about my own melodrama. I left without speaking to anyone, took the long way home, and put the day back into the session where it had started, into tracks and lanes and numbers. When Mara came in at midnight, she smelled like good air and speeches. She kissed me with after-party mouth and leaned her forehead to mine and said, "Thank you for being safe." "Always," I said, because I wasn't sure what I was, and safety sounded like a thing a person with a job could supply. We didn't talk until Saturday. People think confrontation lives best at night. I think it prefers noon when the sun refuses to let anyone pretend. We were at the table with our strange collection of bowls, and I put on the kettle because it gives my hand something to do that looks like benevolence. "I heard you," I said when the whistle did its small theater. "In the panel audio?" she asked, and the speed with which she found the right offense told me I hadn't imagined anything. Between applause, I said, "Terrace." She looked at her mug and then at me, and then at the square of light on the floor like maybe it would volunteer to be blamed. "Jasper," she said. "You know him. The board chair with the opinions about culture and cufflinks. He wanted to talk about wording and walked me to the edge of the room to say it." "And then to the edge of the building," I said. "I said no," she said. "Eventually, which is a confession, not a defense." "How eventually?" I asked, because I worship time. "After I liked being the person he thought an hour could belong to," she said. "After I remembered I already am that person for someone else." There was a time in my life when I would have auditioned Fury right there and then, loud and undignified. But I loved a woman who has to ask rich men to believe in public art, and I engineer sound for a living, which means I have to know when the room can hold yelling and when it can't. "Don't make me your room tone," I said, and it came out softer than I felt. "Don't use me to make someone else sound like less guilt." She winced like I'd put a cold hand where she is warm. "I thought keeping it between laughter and applause would make it not count," she said, ruthless with herself in that way I first fell for. "I thought if it didn't survive the mix, it didn't happen." "The mix is my religion," I said. "Don't faith me." We wrote rules because we always do. We agreed that terraces are not offices and whispers count even if the mics are bad. We agreed that if a sentence needs a caveat, this stays between us. "Don't clip this." No socials. It doesn't belong to her workday. I promised not to treat every male voice in a recording like a suspect. She promised not to test gravity when what she wanted was altitude. Heat might be the only honest language left to people who lie for a living. That night, she turned the lights off with her elbow and climbed into my lap like an apology that believed in verbs. We didn't use sex as a verdict. We used it to remember who had jurisdiction over our noise. She rode me slow, demanding and amused, the way she asks a room to behave by behaving first. My hands found her back with that old memory of how to press and pull without making it sound like force. When we stopped, it was because we were full, not because we were good. On Monday, I delivered the panel. I took out the whisper, not because of Jasper, but because I could. I kept a copy of the raw, filed under a name that meant nothing to anyone but us. That afternoon, the producer called to thank me for removing a weird stutter between laughs. I smiled at the ceiling like a man who knows too much about what people think machines do. Jasper tried for a victory lap. He emailed Mara a note about productive terrace time, which is a sentence that should be illegal. She forwarded it to me with the subject line that has saved us before. "I need you to see this so I don't have to carry it." Then she replied to him with a CC to her deputy and the sentence, "Let's keep all work inside the panel room and on the record." Men like him understand rooms better than ethics. He backed up, nodded, pretended it had been his idea. It didn't stop the reflex. For weeks, every time I opened a project I caught myself scanning the spectrograms for that river of a whisper, the way you rub your tongue on a chipped tooth. Often I found nothing but HVAC and the slow suffering of carpeted ballrooms. Once I found a tech joking about the moderator's suit. Once, in a documentary room tone I'd asked for, I heard two old women counting their steps to the bus, and I cried in the dumb way good microphones sometimes make you. That's the curse of listening for a living. You can't unhear your own habits. We built better habits. She made Thursdays ours, not ornately, just by coming home on purpose with a paper bag of dumplings and a ridiculous grin. I started sending her 40-second clips from my day, ambient rooms where no one was trying to buy me little sonic postcards, a train door sigh, the soft thunk of a camera battery seating, the E above middle C from a piano we had no business having in our studio hallway. She sent back a seatbelt click from a cab, the soft snick of her office door, the laugh she only makes when she walks past the ceramic horse in the lobby she hates, and makes eye contact with it like it owes her rent. The sounds built a life I wanted to inhabit more than my suspicion. The next summit, the same service hired me to mix a fireside chat that had been recorded outdoors because someone thought the city would behave. Halfway through the file, a gust of wind lifted the moderator's hair and carried a dozen sentences away. On the spectrogram, it looked like fire. I wrote it as best I could. In the bed of the chat, I saw another whisper river. I pressed, held, and heard a tech ask another tech if he'd seen the lady with the scarf who always knows where the money is. I laughed alone at my desk like a man, finally remembering how to be pleased by strangers. Sometimes I still run the first panel's whisper for a second for calibration, not for punishment, to remind myself how forensic I can be about my own life, and how little it helps unless it leads to choosing the present. When I do, I don't stop on terrace. I stop on the breath just after, the way air shifts when a person thinks about two versions of themselves and chooses. I want to believe that's what Mara did that night. Choice, late, but still choice. Last week she got home early and found me cutting laughter out of an awards show taped in a room that hated joy. She slid onto my chair in front of me, legs on either side like a decision. "Show me the ugliest bit," she said. I soloed a clip where someone at a table had tapped a ring against a glass in applause and made it sound like performance. She leaned to the screen, listening. "You fix the worst things," she said, kissing my jaw. "Then you leave the good parts intact." "It's what we can manage," I said. We ate dumplings. We put our phones in a drawer on purpose. We took a shower that had nothing to do with time and everything to do with temperature. In bed, we didn't perform an ending. We wrote a middle. People think sound is a souvenir of the moment that made it. Most days it's a set of choices about what you keep and what you refuse to publish. The 3-second whisper that nearly broke me still exists on a drive only I can find. I won't delete it, not because I need the wound, but because I like knowing what I listened past. It reminds me I heard it, named it, and decided to finish a different story. Mara likes to joke that if we ever have a ceremony, she wants it to be mic'd and mixed. Not for the tape, for the way it will make us mind what we say. I tell her vows are best delivered without machines. She tells me the machines make people honest. We don't need to agree. We only need to keep setting the mix together. Her fader up when mine goes down, mine up when she runs out of air, both of us listening for the small river that means a whisper is about to pretend to be a decision. When the city is quiet and the river finally stops auditioning for metaphors, I take a recorder onto the balcony and let it roll for 10 minutes. It captures nothing. Distant tires, a plane negotiating with the night, the clink of a neighbor's spoon. Sometimes Mara steps out, presses her palms to the rail, and breathes like an instrument tuning. I don't press and hold. I put the recorder down. I listen live. And when she leans back against me, warm, steady, present, I put my mouth near her ear and let the only whisper I want to be caught say what it needs to say without mics, without rooms, without anyone who thinks they can own what it means.